John Feyen lied so many times during his campaign that it is a challenge to fully dissect it and explain to the public exactly how he deceived the voters. In this video, I'm going to take a 7-minute clip from one of John Feyen's campaign political events and show you exactly how many times he lied. This is just what I'm going to call a speed round of showing John Feyen's lies, and over the next few weeks I will add court documents and law enforcement records to show that John Feyen knew he was lying when he lied. He knew exactly what he was saying was false. It was no accident that he chose the words he chose, and even after he had been notified that he was being sued for his defamation per se, actual malice lies in this particular clip from a political campaign event, he continued to lie. Not only did he continue to lie, but he used his official campaign page to do so. That campaign page reached a far larger audience than this, although this was live streamed and in front of a live audience. But even though he knew he was being sued for this February 2nd defamation per se, actual malice, it didn't stop him. It didn't stop him because John Feyen knew if he didn't continue to lie, then he would be exposed.
We'll start out with you on this one. Have you ever been sued in your official capacity as a law enforcement officer for violating citizens' state or federal constitutional rights, or a tort claim such as excessive force or assault? And that's for both of you. Yeah? No. Yes. Would you like to expand? Oh, okay. That was part of the question. Yep, absolutely. I added some more to it. Oh, you added more to it? Okay, perfect. Yep. Actually, I was sued by the same person twice for the same thing.
So the first sentence out of his mouth is that he was sued by the same person twice for the same thing. That's a lie. John Feyen knew it was a lie when he said it, but he doesn't care about the truth. The truth is that two separate people sued John Feyen for constitutional violations 15 years apart, and the reason John Feyen said he had been sued by the same person for the same thing twice is so that the voters, the public, didn't get an idea of who John Feyen actually is.
And both times it was dismissed. And I can tell you the story, and I will tell you I would do what I did again, and why I did it, with one exception.
Okay, so now John Feyen tells you he's going to explain what he did, and he's going to tell you what the one exception is. Now, what I want you to do is to pay close attention to what John Feyen says that one exception is that he would have done in this case. John Feyen, when he's talking here, is the Assistant Chief of Police at Fort Collins Police Services in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he is actually talking about his official duties as an officer with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. So he's telling this story as the Assistant Chief of Police at Fort Collins Police Services about what he did in his official capacity as a law enforcement officer at the Sheriff's Office.
December of 2010.
Next lie. John Feyen says this particular case that he's going to talk about happened in December of 2010. That's a lie. John Feyen knew it was a lie. In December of 2011 is when this case actually began.
A woman in our community loses custody of her child.
That's a lie. John Feyen knows it's a lie. It's obvious that the person he's talking about in this particular case is me. Everybody knew about this case when it happened, and the case had never left people's minds over the past 13 years. So right away, John Feyen says, a woman loses custody of her child. John Feyen knew that was a lie when he said it, and because he said it, and he knew it was a lie, that is evidence of actual malice.
The dad, the biological father. Court's ruled, you have lost custody, you have lost custody, you have lost custody.
And that's a lie. John Feyen knew when he said that I had lost custody, that I did no such thing. I did not lose custody of my child. Now, John Feyen is saying that because he's building up this story so that you will think that I was the problem in this case and not his illegal actions. There is no court order that says I lost custody at all, and John Feyen knew it when he said it.
You were, not just shared custody, but you've lost custody completely. For whatever.
Now, he specifically says not just shared custody, but you have lost custody completely. Again, he is bolstering his lies so that the public, so that the voters will look negatively upon me and think in favor of John Feyen. Again, he knew he was lying when he said it, but he said it anyway. That's actual malice.
For reason the courts made that decision, and you're giving the child to the biological father, not the social services, not to the system, but the dad.
Now, when John Feyen is saying this, he knows, because he was the officer involved in the case, he knows that the court order specifically said that the biological father had custody over Christmas break. The case that he's talking about was just a few days before Christmas in 2011, and John Feyen knew that the court order only referred to custody over Christmas break. So he knew he was lying, but he has to lie to the voters to convince them that he did nothing wrong and that I was a problem.
So, unfortunately, those set of circumstances in your life that give you job security as law enforcement come into play. So the act.
And that's kind of a disgusting thing to say if you think about what he's talking about there. So these kinds of things that give law enforcement job security, first of all, that's gross, that would be what was on his mind. But the truth is that child custody cases are civil matters. So for him to claim that a court order regarding parenting time and child custody is a criminal matter that involves the law enforcement agencies is completely false. And he knew it was false when he said it. The law enforcement agencies will tell you across the board, if you have a custody order dispute, that's a civil matter, you'll have to go to the courts to deal with that. They constantly refuse to get involved in civil matters involving child custody. John Feyen knew it when he said it, but he said it anyway. He is a liar, and he can't help but lying at this point because of how much wrong he has done.
Goes to the school. It is the day of the Christmas pageant, and it goes to the headmaster at the school and says, hey, I just want to let you know I'm picking up my son after school. Here's a court order. The courts have said that mom is not a fit mom.
There is no court order on this planet. There is no accusation on this planet that I was not a fit mom. So again, John Feyen has to exaggerate. He has to make his lies even bigger so that the public and the voters will think that I am a horrible human being. I am the worst mom. The courts have said that she is an unfit mom. No court ever found that. No court ever said that. And in fact, the biological father testified at hearings in these cases, along with other people who testified about the fact that I was a great mom. And so again, John Feyen is exaggerating his lies. He's making the public and the voters think that he is a man who cares about child welfare and child safety, and it is the opposite.
And I'm going to pick him up. And the headmaster said, well, I appreciate you letting us know that. Well, so dad leaves. Said, bring your Christmas pageant.
That's another lie. The biological father never left the school. Once he arrived at the school with the court order, he never left. What actually happened was the biological father went to the child's courtroom. Sorry. The biological father went to the child's classroom, and the child refused to go with the biological father, and so he spent a long time in the hallway at the school. The school did not allow the biological father to remove the child from the school, even though the court order said that the biological father could take the child from the school for over Christmas break, but the school refused to do that. One reason the school refused to let the biological father take the child is because the biological father had never been involved in my child's life. He appeared out of nowhere before he demanded full custody, and the school had no idea who this person was as far as his concern for this child.
Mom walks in the door for the Christmas pageant. The headmaster happens.
Here's another lie. Now, John Feyen knows that these details are all incorrect, but he has to tell the story in a way that makes you hate me as a mom.
Well, so Dad leaves, getting ready for Christmas pageant. Mom walks in the door.
Again, the biological father never left. He stayed there in the hallway while the school refused to let him leave.
For the Christmas pageant, the headmaster happens to see Mom in the hallway and goes, "Hey, Mom."
So the headmaster didn't happen to see me in the hallway. I was at the school to pick up my child, as I had done every day of his life. The headmaster saw me there at the front desk because I was going to give the school staff a thank you note at Christmas time. And I wasn't there for the Christmas pageant because the Christmas pageant was not to be held for a few hours. I was there to pick up my child like I had always done. And because I was there a few minutes early, I happened to glance down at the sign-in sheet and saw the biological father's name on the sign-in sheet. That's the only reason I knew the biological father was there.
"I'm sorry to hear about your son." She's like, "What are you talking about?" "Well, Dad was here with court orders. You lost your son." And she's like, "What?"
So the fact that John Feyen keeps saying, "Oh, you lost your son," the headmaster says you lost your son, is again to reinforce in the public's mind and in the voters' mind that everything that happened was my fault.
So she ran down the hallway, grabbed the kid, and disappeared with him.
Again, that's a lie, and John Feyen knows that's a lie. As soon as I saw the biological father's name on the guest sign-in sheet, I did run down the hall to see where my son was because the biological father, as a pattern of his domestic violence abuse over the previous 12 years, 10 years at that point, had threatened to take my child from school or from anywhere he could find my child. He threatened to take him before. Now, it's important for you to know that the biological father had abandoned my child. He actually is on record saying that he wanted my child and I to die while we were at the hospital when my child was born. So this is a biological father that had never spent a single night alone with my child. And that was because he was mostly absent. We didn't know where he was for months at a time. So the critical background that you need to understand about this is the biological father did not care about my child, and he was abusive for any time that he was around me or my child.
We didn't know where she was.
Now, John Feyen says we didn't know where she was. And that's a lie and John Feyen knew it was a lie. That's the actual malice piece because John Feyen was the officer involved in this case. John Feyen knew exactly where I was because I talked to him on the phone. Additionally, John Feyen had lied to my cell phone provider at that time so that he could tap my phone. And John Feyen knew exactly where I was. Not only did he know where I was because we were talking on the phone, he had tapped my cell phone.
What's the rule that she's not a fit mother? The child was.
Now again, he says, the courts have ruled she's not a fit mother. That never happened, not in my entire life. There were no accusations that I was an unfit mother. But that doesn't stop John Feyen from maliciously lying about me, because he knows he has to cover up what he has done. To this point, at this point right here in his story, he has lied to T-Mobile to tap my cell phone. He claimed that he was his own supervisor, as if he didn't need approval from a superior officer to do something as invasive as tapping a cell phone. He said he was his own supervisor because he knew there was not a single cop above him that would grant a permission for him to tap my cell phone, because there was no probable cause and there was no exigent circumstance. The reason John Feyen knew there was no threat to my child is because we were talking on the phone together.
It's not safe.
The court has never said that my child is not safe. John Feyen knew that. He's the one who had the court order. He knew exactly what that court order said, and there was nothing about my child's safety.
So we, at the time of the started investigations, and we tried to contact her, we did all the things that we did in investigations. And again, it's December 2010.
Now, why does John Feyen keep saying it's December of 2010? Why does it need to be December of 2010 when it was actually December of 2011? Well, we'll get to that in a moment.
One of the things that we knew is that she was going to court the next morning, pro se.
Okay, that's a lie, and John Feyen knows it's a lie. First of all, how would he know that I was going to court the next morning? How would he know that? Oh, that's right, he tapped my cell phone. Now, what actually happened was I was talking to various people on the phone after the trauma of picking up my child from school, because I had no idea what was going on. The headmaster at the school, as I was running down the hall, said something about there was a court order, and I had no idea what the court order he was talking about. So I was planning to go the next morning to the Larimer County Justice Center to actually check on whether or not there was an order issued in the case, because it had been weeks since the hearing. We were waiting for an order, so I would go in every few days to check to see if there was an order. So in fact, I had told friends that I was going to the Justice Center the next morning to check to see if there was an order. But let's go back just a bit. When Feyen says I run down the hall and grab the kid, first of all, I didn't grab my child. I approached him. He was sitting hunched up in the hallway outside his classroom door. He was on a little chair, and he had his hood pulled over his head, and the biological father was standing over him. And when my child saw me, he jumped out of the chair, grabbed my hand, and said, "Run, mommy, run." Because I had no idea what was happening, and because the biological father had a 10-year history of domestic violence and had threatened to take my child, of course I have to protect my child. So that's what actually happened. So my child and I got out of the school, we got to my vehicle, and we were safe. My child went to a friend's house so that I could figure out what was happening and to protect him from the biological father.
Which means she's going to represent herself and she's going to petition court to get her kid back.
Now that's a weird thing for him to say, talking about the pro se thing, so that I'm going to represent myself and get my kid back. But remember, at the point that John Feyen is talking about, I had no idea about the court order. I didn't know there was a court order. So for him to say, oh, she's going to represent herself and try to get her kid back, at that point I had no idea what was happening. But again, he has to exaggerate and bolster his lies so that the public and the voters aren't looking at what John Feyen has done, but they're looking at me with disdain and contempt, because any mom who, quote, loses full custody of her child and the court has ruled she's an unfit mom, of course the public's going to look at me like that. But he's doing it so that you don't actually look at what John Feyen has done. And again, remember, the court never said I was unfit. There is no such thing that I lost full custody of my child.
At the time, is she's going to go back to the kid.
Again, that's a weird thing for him to say. He gets a tracker. And again, he doesn't say he's in charge. He says he asked Criminal Impact Unit to get a tracker. Well, that's all because of John Feyen's lies to his superior officers. So the weird thing is that he says, we know she's going to go back to the kid. What does that mean? There was no reason for me not to be with my child. So again, it's a sensational story that he's telling so that you don't look about what he did.
I need to find out where that kid is to make sure that kid is safe.
Okay, he says, I got to make sure that kid is safe. Well, John Feyen knew, because he had been involved in the case for a year prior to this date that he's talking about, that the child was safe with me and that the biological father had a 10-year history of domestic violence. Always remember that John Feyen has to make it look like I'm the problem because of the depth of his criminal actions.
Not at risk. We also got an arrest warrant for Mom and arrested her.
Again, this is interesting. We got an arrest warrant and arrested her. Well, when they arrested me, I was at FedEx Kinko's, and the reason they knew where I was is because I was calling them and saying, I'm here now, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing. So there was no, again, no reason for them to act like they didn't know where I was or where my child was, because we were talking constantly on the phone. They knew I was at FedEx Kinko's because I told them that's where I was. I went to FedEx directly after I went to the courthouse on my own volition to check the court file to see if there was actually an order entered.
And she said, I will never talk, I will never tell you where the child is. He's not safe. You can put me in prison forever.
All right, a couple of things here. First of all, he uses the word prison. Now, I think you can figure out why he uses the word prison, because prison is a much more damning word than jail, for example. So when I deposed John Feyen, I said, do you have proof that that's what I said, that you can put me in prison forever? Because to say something that strong requires some proof, and he doesn't have it. He said there is no audio and there's no video of me saying that. Back to the arrest warrant. So I asked them when they were at FedEx and they said I was under arrest. I asked them why, for what for? And I asked to see the warrant, and the officers with John Feyen said that they didn't need to I didn't need to see the warrant, and that it wasn't necessary for them to have the warrant.
Well, that lasted for about all of 5 hours, and she's like, prison stinks.
Okay, so here he says it again. She's like, prison stinks. Well, first of all, I wasn't in prison.
And here's where he is. So we got him back. Unfortunately, when it happened, it was Christmas.
Okay, so he says, well, we got him back. That's a big part of the story that he left out. So once I was arrested, the only way, the got him back part is, again, intentional choice of inflammatory words. What happened was, after I was arrested and actually got to read the court order that they're discussing, I had my friends and family meet up, and they brought him to the sheriff's office. That's while I was in jail.
I went on Christmas break. The team went on Christmas break. She lived, and they kicked her out of the jail, right? The only bond condition was we get the child back.
Oh, so he says, and we kicked her out of the jail. No, actually, that's not what happened. I posted a $1,500 cash bond because I had a dear friend who drove through a blizzard 60 miles to Denver and 60 miles back before midnight, by the way. He had to go to his bank and withdraw $1,500 cash. So they didn't kick me out of the jail. I barely was able to post bond, and that was because I borrowed the money from a friend. We barely made it in time. for midnight. For some reason, that was a part of the conditions. And so they didn't kick me out of jail. And you notice that he didn't say prison again, because at this point he's realizing that he better not say the word prison again. Prison is a inflammatory word. I was never in prison as part of this case. I have been in prison as part of my work as an investigative journalist, and that's to visit maliciously prosecuted and wrongfully convicted men.
We got the child back. So they let her out of the jail, and I'm winding up, I promise. Okay, we let her out of jail. She gets in the car and she lives up.
Now, this is a longtime cop. He is about to tell the world where I live. There is not a clean cop on this planet who would tell anyone outside of the case where a victim of domestic violence lives. But let me just ask you this. Why would a cop tell anyone outside of the case where a victim of domestic violence lives? Beep, 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 beep. There he just told everybody.
Cold. The battery in the tracker.
Okay, now John Feyen says, well, it's December and it's cold, and the battery in the tracker dies. Now he's going to start talking about his criminal actions, but watch what he does.
Dies, and we can't find her.
John Feyen says we can't find her. Again, it must be my fault that he illegally attached a tracker to my SUV, and it must be my fault that he tapped my cell phone and lied about it.
4 months later, she takes the car to a mechanic's.
Oh, dear God. So he says, he can't find me, he can't find the tracker, it's cold, the battery dies. All of that's a lie. Between when I was arrested on December 21st of 2011 and for the next 3 or 4 months, I saw John Feyen repeatedly. At no time when I saw John Feyen at the sheriff's office or in the Larimer County Justice Center did John Feyen say, hey, I put a tracker on your car and I'd like to have it back. What they did instead was follow me everywhere. I saw numerous agencies, Fort Collins Police, Larimer County Sheriff's Office, Colorado State University Police. I saw numerous agencies, and that's not all, around me all the time when I was on private property. So now he says, she takes the car to the mechanics. Why do you think John Feyen says that? Well, because the truth is that after I discovered the tracking device under my vehicle because I was being followed on a jogging track at Colorado State University by a CSU cop on a motorcycle, after I found the tracker under my car because of that incident, I didn't take my car to a mechanics and mechanics found it. I took the tracking device to the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Now, why doesn't John Feyen want you to know that I took the tracker to another law enforcement agency? Well, because that makes me look credible and it makes him look bad. But he has to continue his story that I'm not credible and I'm the problem. So I take the tracking device to the Weld County Sheriff's Office, horrified, because I had no idea who put the tracker on there. I had no idea who owned it or what the purpose was. So I go to Weld County Sheriff's Office, and they are the ones who told me that there was no warrant for the device and that the Larimer County Sheriff's Office owned it. Not some generic mechanic. It was other cops who caught the sheriff's office lying and breaking the law.
And they find it. And in January of that year, case law changed. Jack?
Oh, dear God. In January of that year, case law didn't change. What happened was a Supreme Court case that affirmed our rights to privacy. So John Feyen is going to butcher this case law. We have a right to privacy, and specifically having to do with trackers. Law enforcement agencies and cops must have a warrant before they attach that tracker to your vehicle. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Jackson versus U.S. comes out from the U.S. Supreme Court and says, you can't, as a law enforcement officer, even put a tracker on a car without a warrant. That wasn't the case law.
That's what the case law has always been. The Supreme Court was only affirming that that was the law. Now, this next part's critical.
Prior to that, before, you put a tracker on it, you just couldn't turn it on without a warrant.
Okay, so he says, he's lying, by the way. He says you could put a tracker on the car before without a warrant, you just couldn't turn it on. Well, why does that matter? Well, because John Feyen has lied for the past 13 years, and he has told the public and the voters that he put the tracker on my vehicle, but it was never turned on. That was a lie, and John Feyen knew it. That's actual malice. John Feyen put an actively tracking device on my vehicle without a warrant, violated every law, every procedure, every rule that you can imagine as it applies to GPS tracking devices and cops.
So all we do is slap the magnetic tracker on for the safety of the child?
Again, remember, we got to slap that tracker on for the safety of the child. John Feyen knew that my child was not in danger when he was with me. He knew that. But again, he has to make me look bad so that his illegal actions get brushed aside.
Case law changed, and she sued me and lost. It was dismissed with federal court.
That's a lie. When John Feyen, when it was revealed that there was a tracker on my vehicle and there was no warrant, I didn't sue anybody at that time because my attorneys, through repeated requests and my own requests for the records about the GPS tracking device, we were constantly told there were no records. So my attorney says we can't sue them for this without records about what happened with that GPS tracking device. So I didn't sue John Feyen. He said I did. He said I did and that I lost. That's a blatant lie, and he knew it.
Senate Bill 217 comes around 2 years ago, right? It talks about all the I-8, and that's the one time in the sheriff's office.
Senate Bill 217 has zero to do with lawsuits against John Feyen. But again, he has to make you think that he was sued because of some Senate bill or some case law change. Flat out lies. The reason John Feyen was sued, the lawsuit he's referring to here, was in 2019, 2020. For the outrageous fact that John Feyen hid the records of the GPS tracking device for 8 years. That's why John Feyen was sued, along with Sheriff Justin Smith and County Attorney David Arode. The three of them conspired to conceal those records from me well past the statute of limitations so that I had no right to sue them. I had no access to the courts. But John Feyen left out that critical part, that he was sued because he hid the records for 8 years.
My internal affairs file, that's the only thing that's on there, and I was disciplined for that, for embarrassing the sheriff's office.
Now, John Feyen says he embarrassed the sheriff's office and he was disciplined for that, but the IA file doesn't say that he was disciplined. There is no record that he was disciplined. And the fact that he is saying he embarrassed the sheriff's office instead of admitting that he broke the law, he tracked me without a warrant, and he tapped my cell phone by lying to T-Mobile about it and by keeping out his superior officers from this case entirely, that's what John Feyen did.
But you know what? I did because I was trying to help the child.
Again, He wants to look like a hero. He wants to look like Superman. He did all these illegal things for the safety of the child. Now, John Feyen knows that my child was never in danger when he was with me. He knows that. But he has to make you think and feel that it is okay to break the law as long as the safety of a child is at stake. If the safety of a child or any human being is truly at stake, guess what you do? You get a warrant, you get an exigent circumstance warrant, you do all these things, but you do it legally because the system is set up so that you can do these exigent things. If there's truly a dangerous situation, you can do it legally. John Feyen didn't do any of that. He didn't even try to do any of that because he knew my child was never at risk when he was with me.
Because the court said she was an unfit mother.
And here we go again, because the court said she was an unfit mother. No court anywhere has ever said I was an unfit mother. Not anywhere. Not for anything. John Feyen has to keep saying that to you so that it gets drilled into the public's mind that I'm the problem, not this criminal cop. It couldn't possibly be all the criminal actions that John Feyen did that's the problem. That's why he is actually malicious when he's lying about me. He knows he's lying.
Senate Bill 217 comes along 2 years ago and it says, you know what, every IE file that every officer has, everything, we can resurrect that. So she sued me in federal court again, thinking that would resurrect her 2011 case.
So he says I sued him in federal court again for the IA file. I never sued John Feyen for any IA file issue. I sued John Feyen one time in federal district court because he hid the records of his illegal actions for 8 years. The lawsuit against John Feyen was because he concealed the records of his crimes.
And the federal judge took one look at that and said, absolutely not, no way, and dismissed it.
The federal district judge, when she dismissed the lawsuit against John Feyen for conspiracy to conceal the records of his criminal actions by attaching a GPS tracking device to my car without a warrant and leaving it there for 4 months, what the federal judge actually said was because the statute of limitations had expired, she had to dismiss it. Remember, the statute of limitations expired because John Feyen, Sheriff Justin Smith, and Larimer County Attorney David Arode hid the records for 8 years.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Now, I think it might be Freudian as these months unfold in front of us that he said, so I'm done. So John Feyen actually is unfit to be the elected sheriff of Larimer County. He hasn't just lied in my case. He has lied in numerous cases. He's been sued by another gentleman from Estes Park because of very similar actions. And there are other cases that I am aware of where John Feyen has done outrageous things to the victims of crimes. So immediately after this 6-minute, 5-minute lie-filled rant by John Feyen, he gets asked another question, and this is the most Freudian, ironic, twisted sequence you may ever see from a lying cop.
John, we have another question here for you. Have you ever discussed changing your political party or affiliation from Republican to Democrat with anyone from Larimer County Democrat Party?
So just a little background on this. The other candidate on the stage for sheriff, Republican candidate, is Jeff Fisher. And initially he was what looked to be the favored candidate. Jeff Fisher is a clean cop. He's never been sued. He has a great reputation. He's very courageous and very strong in his belief about following the law. So the Republicans apparently did not really want John Feyen to be the Republican candidate. And that's because a lot of the old blood Republicans knew John Feyen's history about how he had broken the law with the GPS tracking device and the cell tap and what he did to my child. So it would make sense that the Republican Party would not want John Feyen as their candidate. But listen to what John Feyen says.
I did. I'm not going to lie to you. Absolutely I did. I did for a couple of reasons. Because I want to serve. And I don't care if my name's an R or a D on that. And because when I called the Republican Party, I got treated like dog crap on the bottom of the shoe with this way. Because they already had a candidate. They had Jeff Fisher. And they didn't want John Feyen. I don't know that they want John Feyen now. And so it's like, you know what? I want to serve. I want to serve. And I know this is not winning me any friends in here, but I'm not going to lie to you either. I had to call 4 times to introduce myself before I got a return phone call. And then when I got a return phone call, it was like, Mr. Feyen, what is it exactly you want from us? Well, I told you on the message that I want to be a candidate for sheriff. I'm endorsed by the current sheriff and the former sheriff. And you couldn't even bother to give me a call for a month? So did I look at further opportunities to serve the citizens of this county? Does that mean it's going to change who I am or what I'm going to believe in or what I'm going to do? Absolutely not. The sheriff's office is a political position in this community. But being safe, feeling comfortable in your home, it doesn't know political boundaries. It doesn't know your race, your socioeconomic background. And so, did I? Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie to you about that. I will never lie to you or hide anything that's in my past. And if that turns you off, so be it. But that's who I am, because I want to serve, and I'm serving from the heart, regardless of what the party affiliation says. Thank you.
So you heard him say repeatedly in that last minute that he's not going to lie to you. He would never lie or hide anything that's in his past. But for the previous 5 minutes, that's all he did. All he did was lie to you about what is in his past. And what is in John Feyen's past are criminal actions and conspiracy to cover up his criminal actions. That's who John Feyen is.